In this episode, I talked to Sarah Simon about her mindfulness practices of being a watercolor artist, a gardener, and a mother. We chat about the Enneagram, creativity tips, pro-mom tips for creative kids, how to dissolve your inner critic, and make a space that inspires you to create. Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. I met Sarah Simon about 5 years ago through Instagram. It was a mutual love. I loved Florence, a character of hers I saw on Instagram that she drew and painted, a girl that was often carrying houseplants, succulents, or huge chunks of bright purple amethyst. We collaborated on a project bringing some more flower inspiration into the world of her Florence, and Sarah painted and drew 6 beautiful pieces of this character Florence with flowers that we use in our flower elixirs. In one piece, Sarah actually put infinite love into her paint water, and she turned the pieces into beautiful wallpapers that you can put on your phone or laptop. So we'll make sure we link to those wallpapers in the blog post. Sarah Simon is the designer, artist, illustrator, and author at The Mint Gardener. Inspired by her garden, Sarah creates and teaches lush watercolors inspired by the herbs, flowers, and trees grown in her yard. She lives in Seattle, where she teaches watercolor classes to students of all skill levels, as well as internationally through Watercolor Summit and on Skillshare. Sarah's work has been featured worldwide in many publications, blogs, commercial product design, stationery, textiles, and wholesale and private commissions. Her books, Modern Watercolor Botanicals and The Plant Lady coloring book, were released November 2019. And our national book tour around the USA is in full force. She's teaching workshops all over the States right now. Thank you for being with us, Sarah, on the Flower Lounge.
It's an honor to be here. Yes.
We've known of each other for some years.
Some years. Yeah, I remember when you guys first reached out and you were in love with my flower girl, Florence.
Mm-hmm.
That was so wonderful. And we picked out some really meaningful flowers to have her drawn and created with. And you guys were just so encouraging of my early art days, and you loved my work. And it was so wonderful to work with a company and just you and Taylor that just were so kind and excited and just ready to collaborate. It was really nice. So I know.
Super fun.
Yeah, we've been hanging around for a while.
Are you still doing Florence work or no more Florence? Does she make an appearance?
Yeah, she does. Florence is like my original muse. She was really just that kind of creation that in the middle of the night I'd wake up and there would be a new piece forming in my mind, and usually she was central to it. I love putting pieces together, and oftentimes I will create in my mind for many hours or days, sometimes weeks, a piece before it actually comes out onto paper. And Florence, she's always covering her face. So that's the idea, so that she can be every girl. She is a kind of a universal woman. And the idea is she never has a skin color. You usually don't see any hair, so that when someone sees her and she's holding something beautiful and in color, people can identify with that fascination that she's holding. So I've hashtagged her Florence and her fascinations, and she made a very special debut in my coloring book this year. As you can imagine, a lot of my art pieces are, sorry, my daughter's wrestling. We'll edit that.
No, we don't have to. It's okay. So we'll just preface it and say that we've got Savannah, who's 4 years old, and she's working on all these projects next to you, right?
Yes.
So she might pop in or out, and we'll just have fun with that. She may have a message for the listeners. We don't know.
She may. And she has a very strong, excited personality. So we may hear from her. So yes, she's got a few projects right next to me.
You know, it's funny because I was going through yesterday or the day before, I was going through all of these not old. So we're in this big new building, and I was in Costa Rica when everything got moved over. And so I took advantage of this time before Chinese New Year to just go through everything, because there was stuff, there still is so much stuff in boxes. And I found one of your Florence cards that I had just hoarded and like couldn't bring myself to mail to anyone because I loved it so much. And it was I think it was the first one I ever saw, which was Florence holding that like giant purple piece of amethyst in front of her face.
Yes. Oh, the crystal. Yes. I love that one.
Yeah,
so
I just came
much.
across that.
Oh, that's so cool. What a special. Yeah, I'll have to send you some of my new Florence cards so you don't have to hoard them anymore. And then they won't be hidden in boxes, so you'll be able to find them right away. I always find that, like, I'm constantly like, where did I put that piece? I should probably have a more, I call it creatively organized.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm feeling like the organization struck, like you said, before the Chinese New Year, we've been doing a lot of that, just organizing and trying to put things in place and find beautiful, like creating beautiful vignettes so that your eye can rest and you can feel at peace in your space. But yes, I've been finding all sorts of things from the cleaning out. It's been wonderful. So
so many treasures, right?
So many treasures. But yes, so Florence she's, as you can imagine, what I was saying is a lot of the fascinations that she has are botanically based, because that's one of my things that I just love to draw. There's endless inspiration for her. So she became the plant lady for my coloring book. So Florence is the plant lady. And so I drew her this time, and I'm really excited because I drew full body Florence's, and she's not just one size. And usually her forearms are very elongated so that it can give her room to hold this giant painting. So some of them, her forearms are elongated. Some of them are regular size. Some of the Florences in my coloring book are actually inspired by real people. They're good friends that they're, holding their cat, or one gal's holding a bunch of plants. And I actually have known her on Instagram forever. And she was on her feed just modeling this darling outfit. And I was like, this completely inspired me. Can I draw you for my coloring book? And she's like, oh my God, yes. And for my book tour, I was actually able to go down to Portland 2 weekends ago, and I got to meet her in person for the first time. And it was so fun. It's so cool how things can come full circle. So yeah, so Florence is there. She's in the coloring book. She is very much my muse and still alive. So she's always hanging.
My sweetheart.
Giving me hugs.
Mini Sarah.
Yes.
I saw on your website like 1 million events this year.
Yes.
How did you put that all together? Like, did you and how long ago did you put that together?
Good question. Yeah. So I think that's one of the assumptions that we were chatting about, was that usually people think, and I thought, a publisher puts together your book tour and kind of figures things out. But that's a myth. So I was like, oh, and they said, it's like, okay. They were fabulous. And they're like, we can help in any way you need. But they find that, when someone publishes a book and you go and you meet people and you tell people about the book, more people care about it. So they're like, it's always better to go on a book tour. And so all of those little events came from relationships, people that I've met through Instagram or through friends of friends, that, like the one I just mentioned in Portland this past 2 weekends, was at Soulaby Flowers in Portland. And it's just this beautiful solarium space. I've always followed them. They have been the inspiration of many Florences and just many beautiful botanicals. Often when I'm in a creative rut, I find that drawing or going and smelling plants or digging in the dirt is what gets me out of a creative slump and gets me back into inspiration. So following people that have beautiful floral accounts like Soulaby was always so inspiring. So to get to teach that was so cool. So that was really, obviously I want to go and tell people about my book, but then finding these places was relationships that I'd had and have cultivated over many years. And, genuine, like, oh my gosh, I love what you're doing, just like you guys. And it's like, this is so cool to be able to connect and get to know and hang out with the real humans behind it. So
you just reached out to all your contacts and they were like, yes, we have space. We'll invite you out here. And
yes.
Nice.
Yeah. So I kind of came up with, in my past life, I worked for a very large tech firm, and I actually was in human resources. So my job was actually to create these template emails. That was one of my giftings. And so I created one of those for myself for my own business, which is fun. And kind of was like, okay, here's what it looks like to be on the Mint Gardener book tour. Here's what I need from your space. And really it's not much. It's like a place for people to sit and then running water. It's usually my minimum needs, not too hard. Most places have that here. So I would send it out. And then it was also, I had to coordinate kind of around my older daughter's in school. So I had to coordinate around her breaks because we kind of agreed as a family. My husband and I always loved to travel, even before we were married, before we had kids. We do now, but we've found that we actually really like places when we're all together, because when you're somewhere without people you love, all you can think about is sharing it with them. So we've decided this is a year of adventure, and for the book tours, we're going together. So I kind of had to coordinate things. She's getting Savannah's in the screen and she's showing you her new tattoo.
Oh, what's the new tattoo of?
It is a Star Wars robot.
Okay.
She's into Star Wars. Yeah. Her and Dad love Star Wars. Anyway, so just life is richer and fuller, right? When there's more people involved, and it's a little bit more work, all of us going. And after Portland, we kind of were thinking, maybe there will be a few trips we don't bring the children. There's some lipstick.
Ooh, lipstick.
Yeah, you just never know what's going to happen, and kids tend to bring a little bit of unexpected joy to every situation. So, yeah, so that was
cool that they get to see you like in your wow, or in your element, doing your thing, and get to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's really London. She's my oldest. She's almost 8, and she is currently working on a book. She's going to be self-publishing this summer. She wants a book launch party. So cute. She's going to be hosting a giveaway to all of her friends. It just shows that there's so much more caught than taught when you hang out with kids. And I'm like, I'm treasuring this because I know it won't always be cool to be like mom. And right now it's still cool. So I'm taking that. Yes, that is awesome. Here you go, my love. Yes.
So you know what? Let me just make sure I mention the names of your books so that in case we have some artistic listeners.
Yeah.
Sarah's got 2 books, Modern Watercolor Botanicals and The Plant Lady, a floral coloring book with succulents and flowers. How are they similar and different?
That's a good question. So the Modern Watercolor Botanicals is really, it's kind of a how-to textbook of watercolor, and you can be a beginner, intermediate, or advanced when you approach the book. Each lesson is designed to have 3 levels. I found that when I teach classes, I love the community that comes to the table. Oftentimes there's people that have been painting for years, sitting next to someone that has never picked up a paintbrush. And so the idea is I like when people can meet at a table and not feel intimidated. So the book is designed for a whole group of people. You can sit by yourself, but I've found painting is always more fun when you're with people. And you can sit in community, and you can all approach the lessons where you are in your journey, and you can only get better. So that's Modern Watercolor Botanicals. It's the how-to watercolor, and then I incorporate some of my individual style, which Florence the Plant Lady, embodies. I love incorporating ink. And I love adding gouache. And I say gouache, most people don't actually know how to pronounce the word. So it's Gouache. It's a French word. And people will see it and they recognize it, but no one likes to say it out loud. It's a complicated word, but it's gouache. And I really like adding gouache with watercolor. I like to give food analogies in my book because oftentimes painting or creative art things can feel almost like a cool kids club, and I'm not into that. I like the idea that everybody can understand what everyone's saying. So I like to give food analogies because food is just, that great equalizer. Everybody eats. So I like to say gouache is to watercolor as cream is to coffee. So it adds an opacity, so the ability to no longer see through your watercolor. Watercolor is known for its transparent beauty, but then you pop in a little bit of gouache and it's like dropping cream into a coffee, and it gets richer and deeper and more velvety. And then it also allows you to cover up mistakes, which in watercolor you often cannot do. So gouache is a fun tool to know how to use and incorporate into your skills, and they work really well together. They're like sisters. They hang.
Wow. Wow. So how fun. So your book tour really is like a huge collage of workshops.
Yes. Yes. So I love the idea of a book tour because it's fun to meet people and to go to different cities, but I really love that I get to go and teach, because I found that that's like one of my really amazing ways I get to connect with people. And I love interacting with people and talking about paint. It just lights me up. So the book tour, what we designed is, okay, it's going to be a workshop. So we do 2 lessons from the book while we sit there. So we do kind of a fundamental technique section. Then we mix colors and make color recipes, which is so fun, right? And then we do 2 projects, and then I send them home with a project too. And people either bring their book to get signed, or I usually have books there and then they can get them signed.
So fun.
It's so fun. And then the coloring book, I never fully answered your last question, but the coloring book is just simply a fun coloring book. The pages are not designed for paint. They're designed for markers and colored pencils. And this is the first time I said out loud, but there is a book 3 in the works. So, and it will be a meeting of the 2 books. The idea is that I want to do a watercolor book that is more like a coloring book, and that you can actually paint on the pages, but the lines are already there. So that's what's going on right now.
When's that coming out?
So I chatted with them yesterday, and spring 2021 is the projection. So it's crazy because there is such a long,
When I did my book, it was a year of writing and a year of getting ready and design, and then it finally came out. Yours is faster? 1 year.
Right. Well, yes. It's because there's not going to be a ton of words.
Okay. Gotcha.
So when you add all those words, like my watercolor book took a lot. It was 2 years. Yeah.
So you essentially do the work, they look at it and go, great, let's publish it.
Exactly. Yeah. And this one's going to be really interesting coming up, because I want watercolor to be approachable, but I also don't want it to be a fast food art. I want the paper that we're using to be really quality. So that was why we did a coloring book first, was I wanted to access an audience that I couldn't access. And some people just simply aren't comfortable with watercolor. Like my mother-in-law is one of my biggest fans, but she comes to all my classes. But she goes, to me, a coloring book feels more relaxing because there's less pressure to perform. So that was a really fun way to access people. And then the watercolor book is for those that are really ready to dive into painting. So this 3rd book will be that meeting where it's like, okay, you're ready to watercolor. We want to do, beautiful pieces, but you're going to watercolor in the actual book. So the lines will be there. So there'll be no tracing. It'll all just be there and ready.
So many people love to watercolor.
It's become kind of a thing. There's a mindfulness about watching paint move. And it's one of the only artistic mediums that kind of moves on its own. That's why I think like the encaustics, like the ink pouring, the wax pouring, all those things, just like watercolor, or watching something move independent of yourself and knowing that you don't have the control is actually kind of a freeing thing, because oftentimes it'll do more beautiful things than you ever even imagined you could do when you just let it go. It's great analogy for life, right?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so for those people out there who are either they long to write a book, or they have a book in the works, or they're artists who want to write a book, etc. I know everyone's always curious because people come to publishing a book in many different ways. Do you have anything that you want to share about how you came to your publisher?
Yeah. And I kind of want to hear about your journey too, because it's interesting because every publisher and every journey is so different. So of course, everybody, the idea of writing a book feels exciting. So publishing it really began on Instagram. It's cool because social media has become such a place where everyone can share what they're passionate about, especially obviously if it's a more visual medium. And as an artist, not having to lug around a giant portfolio of work is really nice. So I had 2 publishers reach out in the same week and just send me an email. Hey, we saw your work on Instagram. Would you be interested in speaking with us? And one was a very large publisher and one was one I hadn't heard of. So I kind of researched them both and made calls with both of them. And it's interesting. I've learned over the years that I'm more willing to put my name on something if I'm given time to cultivate it and make it beautiful and mine. The things that I do quickly or that are pushed very quickly often don't come out quite as well. feel like, it's like steeping tea. Good things take time. So I learned that the smaller publisher was willing to move with creative direction and, work with me and work slow and on my timeline. And I talked to my husband about it before, and I was like, this is going to be a very big undertaking. And he's like, you need to make sure that, it's like you have your priorities all in line and that you take the time you need. So we ended up going with my smaller publisher, which is Blue Star Press. And they have just been so attentive and amazing and put up with like all of my harebrained ideas. Like for a while, I wanted to do a page that had these cutouts. It was like a window. You could open the page and it would, you could put your work under it. You could frame it. And I was like, I love this idea. And they were so kind. They entertained me for so long until it just wasn't feasible. But just the fact that they were willing to sit there with me and like try to figure it out, which I'm really looking forward to, like researching paper with them, things like that, where they don't just say, you have to use this paper. They're like, we're sending you 20 paper samples.
Wow.
And you're going to paint on all of them. And then we're going to figure out the one that's going to be best. Because I really do, if people invest their time in painting, I don't want them to feel like, oh gosh, I got so excited about painting and I made this beautiful piece and now the paper's just not quality enough to, So that's really important to me. So
it's really important to find someone you can work with that really values your contribution.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely feel heard. So I went with them. And then after I had submitted my manuscript, they're like, we got some crazy news. I'm like, what? And they had switched distributors, and Penguin Random House is actually their new distributor. So it was crazy because it was this wonderful experience of working with a smaller publisher. And then on the back end to have the access to a Big Fives publishing house, and just really having a big publisher, one of the biggest benefits is their access to all the different markets and the fact that they have these large warehouses so that they can order larger quantities of books. So Amazon never sells out. Then smaller bookstores never sell out. Because when you have a smaller distributor, they can only order 2,000 books because that's the only space they have. So it was just really the best of both worlds. So it was a really huge thing.
I just want to add too that there's such an important part of the story that you haven't told, which is how many posts you put up per day, how many times you posted, the hours of work that went into making those pieces. Then you had the guts to share them and caption them. I mean, like, it's pretty unbelievable that 2 publishers reached out to you. Like, you didn't have to search, you didn't have to get an agent, do all that crazy stuff. You just did what you do best and you shared it.
Yeah.
How many years did you share stuff? Like, how many posts did you share before that happened?
Jeez. Well, that's a good point. I know it's never, I think there's a myth in that, like, oh, it just, just started to magically happen. And it's like we chatted before, I have been learning a lot about my personality and myself from the Enneagram. And I am a 3 wing 4, which is an achiever. So my heart feels full when I can hit boxes and achieve. And it's interesting because Instagram really rewards my personality type, because I'm like, oh, I posted. Good job, Sarah. Here's some likes. And then I feel like I've achieved something. So in many ways, obviously creating the content, creating the art was a joy, but transferring that into usable content, getting it making the edits, storing it, coming up, compiling all of my journals of all the quotes that I've loved over the years and just keeping those things ready. And then, the behind the scenes of like, okay, I've got a giveaway post in an hour. I have to get my kids off to school. I just spilled my coffee all over my lap. Like all of those things that go into it is just, so there's a lot of work. And then, you're right, all of the posts and the commenting. And then I really feel like if a human is going to sit down and look at my work and say something kind, I want to acknowledge them and reply back. So spending time commenting, and engaging, genuine engagement, not just like, hey, thanks, emoji, but real engagement. I just, it's like there's another human on the other side of that screen. It's not a robot. They took the time. They follow me. I want to engage. So yeah, that was a lot. I mean, it had to be probably 3 or 4 years on Instagram. And there was a lot of those years spent under 10,000 followers, right? And, 10K is always that magic number that people talk about on Instagram, that you start to kind of see the algorithm pick you up. But getting to that 10K and not worrying when you wake up in the morning and you see that you gained 3 followers, but you lost 10, not feeling discouraged, but continuing, that's a mental game. And it's the marathon. You have to go, I'm posting because I love what I'm doing. And I love the genuine engagement that the people that are sticking around love. And that's the mental game, and knowing that you can't ever ride that wave of emotions on Instagram. You just have to show up. It's your job. And, if you're having a bad day, maybe don't log on. Right?
How many followers do you have now?
I just hit 128,000.
Ooh, dang, girl.
I know.
Good work.
Thanks. It's
All that
been
engagement.
Yeah, I think that and people sharing my work, creating content that people feel like they can approach, that's engaging and fun and light. I think our world is heavy and people's lives are heavy, and we have a lot of things coming at us all the time. Personal, relational, work, everything. There's so many layers. And I treat Instagram as a point of light that people can just log on. They can escape the challenge and find some beauty. That's usually how I pick my books to read in my free time. I don't like reading heavy things because I feel like there's enough heaviness around. So when I post in that mindset of like, here's a spot of light. I hope this inspires you to find your spot of light. Ready, go.
I love it. It's so playful.
Yeah. And I think I don't think we have enough of that. So that's what I try to be for people. It's fun.
And okay, let's go back to the Enneagram.
Yeah.
How did you, I remember hearing about this like back in college or something, right? And it's funny that you mentioned Enneagram, because I just took a quiz like 4 days ago and was curious. And what I thought was interesting was, I know for sure that my numbers have changed over the years, and that working on a business and growing a business has altered my personality for sure.
Yeah.
So where did you go? How do you know you're a 3? Where can the listeners go to figure out? I mean, I think I just Googled it, but then I got like percentages for each one, and it was more, you're like, sure, you're a 3.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, you can deep dive into the Enneagram like anything. It's an ancient personality tool. I think it's one of the oldest, if not the oldest. It was assigned numbers and things to make it more approachable in the 1950s. I'm reading a book called The Road Back to You. Got it on the bookshelf over there. But the idea is you can take a free test online. I think I did one at like Eclectic Energies. Like I think I just Googled like any free Enneagram test with wing, and wing, W-I-N-G. So there's wings, there's personality subtypes, you learn like where you go in stress and where you go when you're in a good, healthy place. And so you can kind of assess, you can kind of go, okay, I know in this situation, I was moving towards this number, and this isn't where I'm in a good, happy place. So some of my girlfriends were talking about it, and they were all, I find myself around 4s a lot. And those are the Aristocat, it's the artist.
Like the individualist?
The individualist, yes. There's okay. And I heard their description of it. And I was like, well, of course that's me. I'm the artist, right? And then I took it, and I was like, 3, achiever, ew. And then I started reading about...
Why you?
I don't know. I think that when you find your Enneagram, it feels a little bit exposing, a little bit vulnerable. Like I remember one of the things it said about a 3 was, you don't mind the stage and performing. And then it also said something about being able to be a chameleon and to be who you need to be for different groups of people. And for me, one of the worst things someone could say about me is that I'm inauthentic. That just like
Can you be an
hurts.
authentic chameleon?
Right?
Of course you can. Like you
Of
can talk
course.
to like the plumber that comes to fix your sink in a way that's authentic, but it's going to be different language and different topic and different, than if you were to talk to the lady selling you sourdough bread at the bakery. It's
Right.
just going to be different.
Totally. And you're right. No, and I like that analogy. Can you be authentically a chameleon?
I mean, look at Florence. Is Florence not an authentic chameleon?
I know. It's so funny. Go figure. I didn't even think about that. You're so good. My plant lady is a 3, right? She can be anyone, everything. So this butterfly poster behind me, I have one of my really good girlfriends who I took the test with. And she's like, what'd you get? What'd you get? And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, what are your percentages? So she talked to me about it and she helped me understand. And that was really, it's nice to have people around you that understand it and can kind of point you to the right resources, because taking it, by yourself and then trying to absorb it, because there is so much information, it's just kind of overwhelming. But she gave this great analogy. She goes, instead of a chameleon, think of yourself more as a butterfly. And I was like, okay, keep going. I like butterflies better. But butterflies are known for, they're given 2 different wing colorings, right? So when their wings are closed, I can't remember if it's open or closed, but one wing set is when they're closed, they can blend in. It's to protect them from predators, right? They blend into tree bark. It's a very muted tone. It might be open. And then the other, when they flip them, is, hey, look at me, attracting mates, right? So with a flip of a wing, they can be something that they need to be, that they're called to be for survival. So I was like, okay, I'm liking the 3 better. Thank you for talking me through this. But it's cool. The Enneagram's interesting because it just helps you understand your heart motive. And like, I love connecting with people. And because I'm given this gift of being able to turn on when I need to turn on, I'm able to communicate the love of painting and art that maybe if I was a full 4, I wouldn't be able to turn on and perform like I can. So it's kind of this double gifting where like people are like, how are you doing this? You are so calm. Like you weren't nervous at all. And I'm like, actually, my heart was racing. I felt like I'd had like before events, any events, or even like podcasts or things like this, right? Your heart kind of races. You get kind of an adrenaline rush. It's like you've eaten like a really big donut. It's like, woo. And then I start and I just go. I'm no longer nervous. Where people are like, never would have known you were nervous at all. So it's interesting. So I've learned a lot about myself and then how I engage with people. And usually events, it's interesting. Like I'm in it. I am loving every second. And then I have like the come down after, and I am so tired. I usually can't even like turn on my phone to see people reposting. It's so exhausting. I just want to go take a hot bath and go to bed. So, because I recharge alone.
Right.
So.
Okay. So if any of the listeners are curious about the Enneagram, I just pulled it up. So if you want to look it up for yourself, there's 9 different types. 1 is the perfectionist. 2 is the giver. And I'm sure there's like chapters on each, right?
There are, yes.
3 is the achiever. 4 is the individualist. 5, the investigator. 6 is the skeptic. 7, enthusiast. 8, challenger. 9, peacemaker.
And I actually know someone, I think, in every type. So it's so funny as you were reading it. 6 is often described as a skeptic or the loyalist. And that is the person you want in your corner. I find those are the people that will stand beside you and they will fight for you and they are behind your cause. And they're the ones that want to connect. Where 3s feel overwhelmed with that. 6s like to connect. So
what about 8?
So I'm married to an 8.
Oh, tell me about that, because I was actually really surprised. I think when I did this 20 years ago, I was like the giver and the peacemaker. And now I am not. Now I'm the achiever and the challenger.
Okay, so
I'm like a blend of you and your husband.
Yes. So interesting. So often people will mistype into a 2 or a 9. Those are the two most common mistyped because they are what our society expects out of us. So if we're aware at all of the demands or the things that are being put on us, we will type into a 2 or a 9. And then when you retake it and you're more honest with yourself and your expectations and things that you have goals for, that's usually when you get your type out. So you may have always been an 8. So a challenger, they're very similar to 3s in that they see goals and they have no problem doing the hard work to get to them and to achieve them. One of the best things about a challenger that I have learned from personal experience is there is no gray area. My husband will always be like, why? He challenges me. There's no, oh, okay, well, we'll just, kind of fake it till we make it. He's like, figure out how to do it. Why do you want to do that? What's the percentage? What's in it for you? What's in it for them? He likes to figure out all of the details.
It's like digging for the deeper meaning, kind of.
Yeah. Much better way to say it. Yes, you're good at that. You must be a challenger. No, it's interesting. And, people are so dynamic and dimensional. I think that when used as a tool and seen as just as a help to understand how we approach things and look at things, it can be really cool. And I think that there's different dimensions,
Absolutely. I mean, I took the quiz I took a few days ago. I was surprised because I think 20 years ago it was so like, you're this and that's it. Mm-hmm. And then when I took this particular quiz, it was like 92% this, 98, 84, 75. And it was like, oh, well, that's not a lot of variation, right? So you can have kind of a lot of all of them.
Yeah.
Kind of like astrology.
Totally. Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yes. I know it can be a bit like astrology, but I think that the way it helps you see, I think you can be almost like how you relate to different people. I think that that's where it's helped me the most.
And where you go when you're stressed and where you tend to most often express, right?
Yes. Well, and I learned an 8. So when my husband, he feels like very satisfied as a human when he's able to like have a deep conversation with me and almost playing the devil's advocate over and over and over, just so that we can really work out all of the details. So he wants to ask why, and are you sure about that? And no, I don't think so. Even though I think he actually does agree with me, he wants to figure out why he agrees with me, and he does that verbally with me. And so I've learned that like 15 minutes before we go to bed, we do this, and he just feels so happy because he's been able to have this in-depth workout conversation. I often feel exhausted, but I know he feels so loved doing that. And it's, 10 minutes. So I'm like, all right. And he's like, God, we had such a good discussion. And I'm like, so funny. So it's just, I've learned that really makes him happy. And it's a really cool way for him to feel loved. And, so we're able to talk about that. And he's able to understand. And I'm like, okay, I get that you want to have the verbal spar, but I'm too tired right now. So we'll do this later. He's like, okay. So it's just interesting to find ways you relate to your partner and to people. Like I have a really good friend who's a peacemaker and she's so sweet. And then I have a friend that's a 2. I have a few 2s and they're givers. And to truly appreciate a 2, they will give. And oftentimes that can lead to resentment when people don't see them and see that their contribution is how they're loving you. Right. So to love a 2, it's a really good way to figure out how to love people in your life, because you can give back that love language that they are so desiring, but they might not even be able to verbalize how they feel loved. So
I love that.
Yeah. Like I'll pour paint until 10 p.m. for trays that I'm giving palettes to people. And that makes me feel happy and loved because I have achieved this before I have closed out for the day. So it's just different ways that you can figure out how you feel loved and heard, and then to love the people in your life and hear them. It's really cool. So that's how I've used it so far. So.
Wow. And what is taking a little pivot or turn here? What is your relationship with nature off of or away from the paper and the paintbrush. You said you have a greenhouse.
We do. Yeah. So we live on 1/4 acre in Seattle. So it's cool. We can get on a bus and get downtown, but we can also be in a space that's quiet. So we found it's a really good meeting of both worlds. And my husband gardens like I paint.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so
cool.
he's very passionate about our garden. He tends to be a bit more passionate about growing edibles. He would, corn, kale, spinach, lettuce, carrots. He did these potatoes that were just outrageous this year. So for me, my job has been to convince my challenging husband that flowers add so much beauty to a garden. So we often, when we plan out the garden for the upcoming year, it's going to be happening here in a few weeks, we kind of partition out the 1/4 acre. And dahlias need a lot of sun, just like tomatoes. So often tomatoes and dahlias they're living next to one another in our garden. So we share garden beds. And what he's found is the flowers actually really bring a lot of bees and pollinators to his vegetables. So go figure, they work out really well together.
That's great.
So we invested in a greenhouse about a year ago. And the reason we actually did that was my husband was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the fall of last year. Wow. So it's something I don't share much. However, it is why we bought the greenhouse. We wanted to prolong the growing season and also provide a space that was outdoors that still felt like the garden in the winter. And we keep a small heater in there. It's a little chilly to be in there right now, but the citrus trees and the banana palm leaves.
Wow.
Yeah, they're very happy. And it's actually kind of become this third place where you walk in and it smells tropical and it feels good. And you're in this glass house, so the light is beautiful and you can hear the rain on the roof and it's a pretty place. And with that diagnosis, which he's doing wonderful, we've decided to use food as our medicine, and my husband's fully vegan, and I'm a bad vegan, but I try really hard.
Bad vegan.
I try really hard to support him, and then also all of the knowledge that I've learned and just seen firsthand of how a diet can actually change someone's course of life. He was, losing feeling in his hands and his back, and with the diet change, he's fine. No lesions, no repeat problems. And when you receive a diagnosis like that, any of us, our time is limited, we're fragile, but that kind of helps you to realize you want to open the good wine now. You don't stick it in the cellar and wait until you're 65. You go, okay, we love to garden. This is going to be a huge investment, but it's worth every penny because we get to enjoy it and live here together. Be here together today. So we invested in a greenhouse and it has been so much fun. Like I mentioned, all of the benefits, and he can start all of his seeds kind of late February, early March, and he likes to grow everything. So he purchases organic seeds and grows everything from seed. And then we plant it, and then we often give a lot of we'd have a little, plant sapling sale. And, it's just really, we just give it all away. It's so much fun because he just loves it. So it was interesting because I was like, well, what are we going to do with the greenhouse in the winter? It's not very warm, but just this past weekend, one of my girlfriends, speaking of opening the good wine now, she's an incredible florist here in Seattle. It's Teresa Johnson Studios. And she's like, I'm doing flowers for everyone all year, but I never pause and do it for me. And she's like, would it be crazy to do a birthday party in your greenhouse?
Wow.
I was like, not at all. And it was one of the most beautiful things. And it got steamy in there. It actually hit over 85, which means that the vents had to open at the top of the greenhouse. And it's just, 6 humans in there laughing, talking. And I think we finally cleaned up and we're done by 1 a.m. And it was only candlelight and a little string light, and it was foggy, and it was beautiful. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I have a question. Well, I have a couple of questions, but one that came to mind as you were talking is, so I imagine if I were to put myself in your shoes, my husband gets a diagnosis. It's hard to not sort of like Google all the articles and kind of spin out and try to imagine how the future is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is just like staying in the present moment. Do you, when things are challenging for you, do you turn to your painting as a form of therapy, or is that more you process it in a different way and painting just is that happy joy stuff?
That's interesting. So I didn't know how I was going to process it. And because it was so hard for him to hear, and then watching his parents work through it and just come alongside of us and our friends bringing meals and our kids, like I felt like actually I had to be pretty strong. And my go-to demeanor is kind of like optimistic. So that's just, I feel very blessed that that is how I came out. So I kind of went happy joy, and we're going to be fine, and this is going to be okay, and we're going to figure this out. But I actually did bury myself in painting and work. My manuscript was due the week after he was diagnosed.
Oh my God.
It never fails. Like things always happen at the same time.
Life.
I know. So I called my publisher and I was like, this is like a little bit more intense than my dog ate my homework, but I'm going to submit this, and there may be a little bit more fine tuning that should have been done, but this is what I can do right now. Yeah. So, and they were like, oh my God, don't even worry about it. So of course, again, a wonderful small publisher, they don't, they can move with me. So yeah, I painted a lot. I remember my younger one was still napping, and I just remember I would go during this time, I'd actually go into her room while she was napping because I just wanted to be near her. And I would paint in like the semi-darkness just so that I could paint and be by myself. And like, I think that was how I processed. It was when I was by myself in the dark painting.
Wow.
I know. And I'm trying to remember like what I painted during that time. And nothing is coming to mind. So I must have just been painting feelings, and it must not have been like a final piece that was like joyful and good. So it's probably just like a lot of like wet weeds and a lot of leaves. And yeah, I just buried myself, I think, in work. And I process, that's another thing I've learned about a 3 is we hold things together, we perform, and then things come out like later. Like I think everybody does this somewhat, but I was at the dentist a few months later and I just started crying. And I was like, what's wrong with me? But it was interesting because I was processing things, like something that wasn't a big deal all of a sudden became a bigger deal because I was trying to process what had happened. And so thankfully now it's been a year. We celebrated on the year of diagnosis. We had a big celebration, and we're like, look, it was not a death sentence. And we were convinced it was. And so it was a moment to pause and go, we don't know the future. And sometimes we think we do and we're wrong. And thank God. Right? So yeah, I think I process painting. That's my happy place. And the garden is too. We've really been into grounding lately, and just like walking around barefoot, even though it's a little chilly, but it feels really fresh and good. And there's something about feeling the earth beneath your toes, even if it's cold and wet, that just is a recharge. We've made a game of it, actually. How long can we handle it? It's my husband and I, we compete. It's pretty fun, but we go out and we ground in the earth, and obviously grounding in the summer and the spring is a little bit more pleasant. But I know that like, if I feel like I keep hitting a wall with painting, if I come to my desk, if I show up for the work and it's not flowing, I know that maybe I'm pushing myself a little bit too hard and I need to step back. And that means I need to recharge in other ways. And one of the ways I recharge is I just go and I weed and I just smell earth and dirt. And my husband does that too. Like our rhododendrons got a very, very intense trim last weekend. So I was like, oh, I needed to let off some steam. Okay. So yeah, I think that the garden has become, it's cool too, because it's a place where we recharge, but then it's also a place where our kids are a part of our family. Like we all have jobs, we all have roles, and they love being in it. So we all can show up in the garden and do our thing all independently.
What are the little ones' roles?
Good question. It's changed over the years. in the beginning, it was a lot of like, hiding behind the wine grapes and making little burrows and forts. We called them fairy huts. But like London, she'll be 8 in March. She helps plant. She actually has her own garden, just
Nice.
London's garden. Yep. And she goes through the seed catalogs and picks out what she wants to grow in the spring. It's really fun.
That's like a palette, a creative palette in itself, right? You get to choose what you want.
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely. She loves it. And she has so much fun. And actually this last spring, it was pretty funny. Colin came in from the beginning, so he goes, have you seen my red carrot seeds? Like they were in there and now they're not. And we grew them and they're like 3 inches. I shouldn't be able to miss them. They're new sap, like new little plants. And we looked around and toured the garden, and sure enough, London had taken all 6. And she planted them in her garden, and she even put the markers. So we knew, we're like, okay, there's the red carrots. I guess they're growing in London's patch this year. So she's super cute. She really loves that. And we find it's interesting. They are so much more willing to eat things from the garden when they have a part in planting it.
For sure.
So they're excited about it because they're like, I remember when I planted these seeds.
Yeah.
She likes some yogurt. My 4-year-old just came to me with a giant tub of yogurt. Okay, give me a second, sweetie, okay? And the little one in the garden is more like, we have these really cool, it's cool. We moved into this place that had already had a legacy. So we had this really old magnolia that we love, and then raspberry canes that are golden raspberries.
Whoa.
Yeah, and they're over 30 years old. They have to
Wow.
be. Yeah, so my job and Savannah's job, the little one's job, is to tend the raspberry canes every spring and she's like, wait, when are the berries coming? And we learn it's a very, very, very short period that the berries are ripe. And when they're ripe, you're picking every day, sometimes twice a day.
Wow.
And it's for about 2 weeks, and that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. So and you're kind of near the end. You're like, I am so sick of raspberries. But if you don't pick them, you're missing out and you're not doing the plant any honor. And then if you don't fully harvest and then take care of next year's harvest isn't going to be as good. And, for the other 50 weeks of the year, you really want those raspberries.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's a really intense harvest, and then it's just gone. So.
And how do you work your children into, like, sometimes I hear folks say like, oh, it's hard to be a mom and do creative things at the same time. Do you paint with them? How do you get your work done, but also invite them into the process?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it is. It's different for every family, and every child comes out so different. There's like a different capacity. Both of my daughters, they're fine motor. Like they have been into painting with me since the very beginning. So I don't probably get my best work done when I'm also supervising them. Although as they get older, it has been easier. So my studio is in my kitchen area. And so we have a big kitchen table, and I just cover that in craft paper. And then I put out plates of food, like apple slices and things like that, and paints. And they have their own bin of paint. They have their own paper. They have all their things. And so they kind of remind me of, like, I guess, little butterflies too. It's like they land and they paint for a while, and then they flit away, especially in the summer. Then they're out in the garden, and then they come back, and they don't stay for prolonged periods of time, but just leaving it out, one, it saves me on the cleanup. It's amazing. Like if I were worried about cleaning up after every time they created, I would be cleaning all day. So I kind of have like a cleanup time in the afternoon or evening. And other than that, yeah, we just leave it. And, it's organized chaos. You kind of have to learn, if you want to get stuff done, you have to be willing to work in a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, so they usually paint alongside me. So.
And do you have to get her yogurt?
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. She's good. She brings me a spoon and a bowl, and I just kind of shoveled on the side.
Oh, good work. Look at you.
So she's learned, right? She's learned to work with me too. So
I want this yogurt, and here are the tools, Mom. Help me. I love it.
Well, she knows when I'm filming a video, like especially a hyperlapse, like I can't stop and serve her yogurt. So she actually leaves things at my feet. So when my hyperlapse is done, she's like, 2 minutes later, when 4-year-olds have a heart, 2 minutes feels like hours, right? So she'll put things at my feet and then she'll go do her thing. And then she'll come back and check on me and I'll be like, 1 more minute.
Oh, so sweet.
So she puts it at my feet. So I usually know what to do.
Adorable. So, okay. And to sort of go close to wrapping up and closing, any tips that you would offer for folks who either have an inner critic or who don't have creativity or artistic endeavors as their full-time gig, and so making time for it, it's kind of like this indulgence that they love, but the time, which maybe artists have that too. Any tips?
Yes. Those are, so I cover in my book, I obviously teach you how to paint, but I begged my publisher, and this was one of the harebrained ideas they listened to and have encouraged. I have these essays called Why Art throughout the book. They're sprinkled after every lesson pretty much. And I actually talk about those things a lot because those are things that come up. Like you said, everyone feels them. The inner critic is a jerk. It's a real jerk. I would suggest that it's a book called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Good.
You're nodding. Yep. It's an incredible book. It's not something where you have to sit down and be like, okay, I have a new book on my list.
It's easy. Oh my God. Right.
Oh, the chapters are sometimes a paragraph. And that is the best way to fight the inner critic. I feel like a few chapters of that book, when you're in a low slump or you're feeling that resistance to create, or the inner critic is always the loudest and strongest when you're close to creating something beautiful and good. And that's when you have to push the hardest. And he talks about the muse and how you have to show up. You can't just wait. So that's a fabulous book. And it's definitely a way to combat the inner critic. And then, yes, there is a practice, even if it's not your full-time job, which it's funny because when something is your full-time job, it's not as fun, right? So you have to make space for yourself to still have fun. What I've realized is that when you make
fun, I'm just going to repeat that word a bunch of times. Fun,
right?
Fun.
You have to make time for fun. And it's kind of funny because it's like people will be like, well, I have anxiety. And people are like, well, you probably, don't have anxiety. It's like, you can't tell someone to not have anxiety and you can't tell someone to just go have fun, right? But you can create a space for yourself in which you can show up and sometimes have fun. And I've found that painting, if you can give yourself 20 to 30 minutes, and that doesn't include setup time. Like I usually have my paint out. My water's really easy to grab and my paintbrushes everything's there. And I can just sit down for 20 to 30 minutes. And even if you're just watching paint move, there is a mindfulness that happens. It's a slowing down. It's a breathing that happens. And that is one of the most inspiring ways to have fun. So even if you didn't create a masterpiece, but you've allowed yourself to breathe in a space when the day is chaotic, that either opens up like your heart so that you can feel like you can create something. And then you'll be sitting there for hours and you won't even know the time has passed. Or you can walk away from your desk or your table or your floor, wherever you've created, and you can go, okay, I did something nice for myself, or I caused just myself to calm down. And as an adult, I think that that's fun, right?
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking that like visualizing, because you often, like the way you speak paints pictures. And that idea of having something that's already built out as a space for that you can kind of land into, and how important it is to do tactile things, because I'm just like all of them. Like I put my notes in my phone and I'm on the computer, but if you have a space built out that you can sit down in any moment and paint or write, if that's your thing, or pull a cards or dance or whatever is your medium, I think you're right. You have that visual reminder. So you may be more willing than if like all your art supplies are in little Tupperwares closed up and then you've got to make a big production to get them out. Yeah. I love the little bot idea. That's a great idea.
And it doesn't have to be fancy. I think we get hung up. Like everyone's like, I love your marble. And I'm like, oh no, this isn't real marble. This is this is a faux marble surface that it's like a big square. It's from Replica Surfaces. She's wonderful. She made these beautiful spaces. And I literally take it with me everywhere. I go outside. I go up and visit my in-laws with it. It's really, so not being particular, because about your space, because that's just another form of procrastination. So even if you're sitting on your floor where you can notice that you probably should be sweeping, don't sweep, just paint or write or draw. So, yeah.
I love that. And then last question, are there any words of wisdom that you often find yourself sharing with others, telling others, or otherwise something that springs to your heart right now?
I love that. I think that people are often kind of tied up with their lives, and there's like that deep inside desire that you either stopped listening to because you're an adult now and you don't have time for those kind of things, or you can't even hear it anymore because there's so many loud to-dos and have-tos. And I think that creating that space, that 20 or 30 minutes of just breathing and doing something, like you said, with your hands. There's no phones involved. There's no computers. There's no electronics. You're weaving, or you're knitting, or you're just something tactile. Taking that time, I think that kids do it so well. They can be eating and all of a sudden be like, I need to paint. And they're open, right? They don't go, oh, I can paint after this. They just grab their stuff and they paint. And I think that practice of showing up and listening for those 20 minutes of just being super chill, it might reignite that fire, and you might be able to find what that inside desire is. And there's so much intrinsic value in doing something beautiful with your hands. And even if like you're worried that it isn't pretty enough to post, it's like, who cares? It's not for them. It's for you, right? I just find that I'm a much kinder person when I spend time to just calm down. So I think it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, I reflect back on my business, and I think there was a lot of not allowing myself to have fun in the beginning, and a lot of like doing things that I thought I had to do. And when I actually look at what would have been the things that would be fun for me, I would have grown my business so much faster, because I would have been doing videos on YouTube, and I would have been doing more stuff on social instead of going to like trade shows where I didn't fit in because I couldn't wear high heels and get drunk every night at the bar. Like, but I was really trying. But if I would have just done those things that would bring me joy, we probably would have grown a lot faster. So I can so relate to that. And then what you said about being able to grab the inspiration in the moment that it hits you, instead of being like, oh, I'll do it later. Right.
It's not worth waiting for. I step over dirty laundry consistently, and I don't sweep my floor as often as I should. And I wear my pajamas, but that means that I have time to create. And so inside I feel whole, and that means I'm kinder to the people around me, and those are the ones that matter.
So beautiful.
I'm trying.
So if you want more of Sarah, you can find her at themintgardener.com, as well as Instagram. And there is a huge list of workshops and events on her website. And then, did you want to talk about the flower painting club at all?
Oh yeah, that's a fun one. Sure, briefly. It sprang out of this desire, again, to make art accessible. And what I found in all of my workshops that I've taught over the years is people feel freed up to simply paint when the lines are there. And so I thought, okay, what if people could sign up and they get, a new drawing every month? And I promise one, but I've been delivering like 5 or 6 because I like to draw, right? But some people, the drawing is what stops them from painting, and painting is the mindfulness. Drawing can feel a little bit daunting because you have to have a composition and you have to put pieces together. But if you just are sitting down, you only have 20 or 30 minutes and you want to just paint, I've got the lines for you. So you can do the flower painting club, and that has been something people have just been really excited about. You can paint the same piece 5 different ways, and you don't have the fear of the blank canvas because the lines are there. And then you don't have the fear of messing up your piece because you can have lines again. You can redraw the lines again and try it a completely different way.
And then you can go out of the lines.
And you can draw out of the lines. Exactly. You can try all sorts of things because the form is there. So you don't have to worry about being perfect, because that always stops the creation process. You can have fun. And then I've got like a community of people that are doing it. I think we're already at like 100 people or almost 100. And everyone kind of goes, oh, I used, Payne's gray for this. And oh, I used this green. And what did you think about this? And oh, look, I rearranged the floral elements. I got excited. I printed them out and then I cut them out and I made a puzzle out of them. And so people are finding different ways to be creative and then encouraging the community too. So it's really fun.
I love that.
It's been fun.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's all on my website. So you can join all those things and ask me all the questions. I really will respond. I like to respond. I like to talk about paint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Okay. Can I squeeze in one more question? I know it's been so long.
You're fine. You're fine. I was choking for the first half, so you're fine.
If we were to bring in the flowers a little bit, and both you and I know that different flowers have different energies. The last little question would be like, when you paint different flowers, do you feel different?
Oh, I like that. One of my friends, the gal that we did the greenhouse party for, she was talking about that and how different numbers to her give her different colors in her brain. I know, right? And there's a fancy scientific term for it. It's like something about synchronization, but it's the idea that different senses correspond to different senses and they hit different things. So, and it's interesting. So for me, like you said, there's energies and flower feelings. And absolutely, some flowers for me are sad flowers. Lilies always feel a little sad for me, and I don't know why. And I don't know if it's a personal correspondence. You would be able to tell me more about that.
What about dahlias?
Dahlias are like, they're energetic and vibrant, and they feel almost like a red to me. They feel aggressive in a good way, but I don't know. Is that the right answer? I don't know.
There's no right answer.
Okay. I love them, and they're one of the most resilient, drought resistant. So they are the last queens of summer. And so I see them as very strong.
Wow.
Yeah. We're like an iris. Bearded irises are some of my favorites. And they are some of the first in the spring. And I see them as like very fresh and kind of like a breath of like fresh air or like water after a desert. They feel very renewing.
When you paint them?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now I'm going to your Instagram page and I'm going to check out all your work again.
That's great. I like those questions. That's fun. Yeah. I think there's the, language of flowers, but then there's the way flowers make you feel and then the different colors, how they make you feel. And yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I've always loved your sense. That inner peace one that you have, that mix, I would use that. I need to order more actually. The serum on my wrists before bed. Oh my gosh. It's just, I get into bed and my husband's like, what is that scent? I'm like, I know, I'm savoring it. I'm not sharing it. Sorry.
Well, we can send you some for sure.
You're so sweet. No, I'll buy some. I want to buy some. I want to support you guys. But yeah, I know that's your different scents are just amazing. And I just loved. I remember one of the Florences we did, I actually put your love elixir in the water as I was painting.
Right, I remember
that was so fun. That was so amazing.
That's so
it
cool.
smelled amazing as I was painting it. It was incredible. So it's really fun.
That's so fun. Oh, yeah. That gets my brain thinking. Ooh, flower essence and painting class. Okay. If we ever get up to Seattle, we should do a collaboration.
I love that. Oh my gosh. We could do different little mason jars of waters. And there are different scents in them. And then people could choose which flower is which. Oh, it's like say so much about personality and stuff. Talk about personality tests.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if they're flowers that we can identify something about the person.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
In the works.
Yes. In the works. I love it.
Thank you again for being on the Flower Lounge.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Katie. It's so nice to just chat with you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.